have today are Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb,
Margaret Powell,
Zahra Billu, Cecily Surosky, and Dr. Hatem Bazian. The American Muslims for Palestine, a national grassroots organization educating the public about Palestine and its rich cultural and historic heritage, today announced its nationwide outdoor advertising campaign, which has come to San Francisco's Muni buses. The ads call for an end to Israeli apartheid and to unconditional American aid for Israel. The campaign, which will appear on buses from the Presidio garage, will run for 4 weeks before moving to cities across the country. The point is especially critical now as AMP has come under renewed attack by the Anti-Defamation League and the Jewish Community Relations Council, which are attempting to stifle open debate on these important issues by labeling any public critique of Israel as hateful and anti-Semitic. AMP considers Jewish participation in our work to play an essential role in advocating for a better future for all the people of the Middle East. AMP has worked with numerous organizations, including Jewish Voice for Peace, Jews for Justice in Palestine, Jews for the Palestinian Right of Return, and the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network. While Israel denies its policies constitute apartheid, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a Nobel laureate, stated, "I've been very deeply distressed in my visit to the Holy Land. It reminded me so much of what happened to us black people in South Africa." With that being said, I would like to introduce our first speaker today, Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb, who is the coordinator of Shomer Shalom Network for Jewish Nonviolence. Rabbi Lynn is a storyteller, ceremonial artist, author, wilderness guide, nonviolence trainer, and peace activist who has received several human rights awards. Rabbi Lynn is on the advisory board and Rabbinic Council of Jewish Voice for Peace. She has been a member of the Fellowship of Reconciliation since her early 20s and is the co-founder of Interfaith Peace Builders. Please help me welcome Rabbi Lynn.
Sorry about the computer. Friends, it is unfortunate that this press conference is in response to JCRC and ADL's distress over the use of the word apartheid in the bus ads, without exhibiting a similar distress over the living conditions of Palestinians which the word describes. The separation wall and the system of security fences, checkpoints, and Jewish-only roads built, maintained, and patrolled by Israel's army to enforce land seizures are the most visible evidence for using the word Israeli apartheid to describe the system of Israel's governance over Palestinian life. For heaven's sakes, there are even separate stickers given by Israel in the airport to indicate Jewish or Arab identity. Currently, over 600,000 Jews live side by side with Palestinians in the West Bank. Jews enjoy citizenship while Palestinians do not. After 45 years of negotiations, Israel has warehoused Palestinians into smaller and smaller ghettos, while it continues to appropriate houses, farmland, entire villages, and sections of the West Bank. Meanwhile, Gaza is under siege. Palestinian family homes are forcibly taken over by armed settlers, and soldiers are destroyed by Caterpillar militarized bulldozers, while their Jewish brothers and sisters move in and freely die. Palestinians do not have the same rights. It is illegal to enter their towns. They do not enjoy export and import rights, freedom of movement, or the right to visit the city. They are subject to administrative detention and military assault without any legal recourse. The only arena Palestinians have to seek justice is the international community. All this is happening on the basis of identity or demographic concerns of Israel. A Jewish state needs a demographic majority today, there are equal numbers of Palestinians and Jews living in Greater Israel and the Gaza Strip. One population enjoys rights and privileges, the other does not. That is the legal definition of apartheid. As a clergy person, I'm also concerned by the curtailing of the right of religious freedom. All my friends in Palestine do not have the right. They do not get permission to visit their holy sites. They are imprisoned in their own cities. As a religious person, this is deeply and profoundly upsetting. And yet, throughout the Holy Land, you will see people mixing. For instance, the divided city of Jerusalem, Israeli Jews leave West Jerusalem to go to the old city on Shabbat for a meal. And there you will see Palestinians in their homes, stone passageways, and market stalls, under siege by their Jewish neighbors, nonetheless demonstrating their exquisite hospitality, even as the hovering abyss of transfer, displacement, military incursion, and permanent apartheid threatens to swallow up the last crumb of their future.
Thank you, Rabbi. Our next speaker will be Zahra Billoo. She is the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, San Francisco Bay Area. Zahra strives to promote justice and understanding at local and national levels. In 2009, Ms. Billoo joined CARE San Francisco Bay Area and immediately embraced her role as community organizer and civil rights advocate. She frequently provides trainings at local mosques and universities as part of CARE's efforts to empower the community while building bridges with allies on key civil rights issues. Please help me welcome Zahra Billoo.
Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm here on behalf of the Council on American Islamic Relations really to congratulate American Muslims in Palestine on this national effort. We stand with them as they utilize their First Amendment right to educate our fellow San Franciscans about their complicity in funding apartheid in the state of Israel. It is our tax dollars, yours and mine, that our elected officials continue to send in a blank check without any strings to Israel, facilitating racism and apartheid. And so we're excited to see this education coming to the streets. We stand with AMC despite the attacks by the organized Zionist community in calling AMC anti-Semites. This is an age-old fear attacking Arabs and Muslims willfully and publicly challenge apartheid. We stand here today with our Jewish allies condemning apartheid and working towards a solution in the Middle East that will bring equality towards all. Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you, Zahra. Our next speaker is Cecily Surowski. She is the Deputy Director of Jewish Voice for Peace, a 35-chapter national Jewish advocacy organization that supports democracy, international law, and self-determination for both Israelis and Palestinians. Prior to her work in the world of Israel-Palestine politics, she hosted AM Talk Radio and wrote a column for the Providence Journal. Cecily is the editor of Muzzle Watch, a blog that charts efforts to stifle debate on Israel-Palestine politics. Please help me welcome Cecily Surowski.
among many, that being Jewish requires one to support the repression of the Palestinian people. We imagine and work for a future in which Israeli Jews and Palestinians can share the land with dignity, equality, and in true peace. The Jewish community here in the Bay Area is stunningly diverse and rich. We disagree about politics, we disagree about God, and most of all, we disagree about Israel, which is why there is no one single spokesperson community. You could say our very difference and diversity is our essence. Suffice it to say, our members, and we have thousands of people on our list just in the Bay Area, were shocked to see a statement from the Jewish Community Relations Council and local chapters of the Anti-Defamation League and the American Jewish Committee saying that the Bay Area Jewish community condemns these acts because they use the phrase Israeli apartheid. These groups do not have a right to represent all Jews. Some of them don't even publicize their list of members, presumably because those lists are so small. The Anti-Defamation League has no right to judge what is apartheid, what is not. They famously spied on anti-apartheid activists in the late 80s and attacked Nelson Mandela's African National Congress as being totalitarian, anti-democratic, and so forth. I could go on, but you get the point. Instead, this is what I want to say about why we fully defend American Muslims and Palestine's right to use the term apartheid. One, apartheid is a legal term precisely defined under international law and refers to policies in any state, not just South Africa. The question isn't whether the word is offensive. The question is whether Israel's practices in the occupied Palestinian territory meet that definition. And people have different opinions, but I will tell you the truth is that many high-ranking Israeli officials, many journalists, many human rights experts have concluded that the term apartheid does in fact apply. In fact, I have here a 300-page report that the government of South Africa commissioned top legal scholars from Palestine, from South Africa, and from Israel, who concluded after 50 years of study, 15 months, that in fact apartheid does apply.
You're off your tape. You cannot find it the way you born. All of you have ears here. They're standing over here and listen to me. Stop. Read your
Why
Bible
is
here.
it
Stop.
okay
Read
for
your Bible.
high-ranking Israeli
All of you
officials and human rights experts
This
to
is
say
a lot of business.
that
This
apartheid
is a lot of
applies?
business and their children. And the mother and the father and their children, not no politician. Politician is rejected. Yeah, your politician is rejected. This is the land of the father and the mother according to the Holy Bible. That no man can find it the way you born. It's okay. Don't go through your thing. Stop kissing.
Why is it okay when high-ranking Israeli officials and human rights experts use the term apartheid, but when an American Muslim group uses it, it's considered by groups here extremist, morally reprehensible, and inflammatory. At best, it is not standard of the word defined at worst. This is pure bigotry. I want to close by reading just a few of the many meanings of
Stop it! Get away from me! Shut your mouth and get away from me! Get away from me!
I want to close by reading just a few of the many quotes from Israeli high-ranking officials about apartheid. The former Israeli Foreign Ministry Director General and ex-Israeli ambassador to South Africa, Shalom Liang, said just a few months ago, if you, President Obama, intend to come here for a courtesy visit, don't come. Don't come. We don't need you here for a courtesy visit. You cannot come to an area that exhibits signs of apartheid and ignore them. That would be an unethical visit. You yourself know full well that Israel's standing with the apartheid cliff. Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister, said in 2010, as long as in this territory west of the Jordan River there is only one political entity called Israel, it is going to be either non-Jewish or non-democratic. If this block of millions of Palestinians cannot vote, that will be an apartheid state. And by the way, those Palestinians cannot vote. And I'll close with former Israeli Minister of Education Yossi Sadi, because this is a message for all of us. What acts like apartheid is run like apartheid and harasses like apartheid. It is not a duck. It is apartheid. What should threaten us, however, is not the description of reality, but reality itself. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Hatem Bazian. He is the chairman of American Muslims for Palestine, a national grassroots organization whose mission is to educate the American public about the issues related to Palestine and its rich cultural heritage. Dr. Bazian is a senior lecturer in the Department of Near Eastern and Ethnic Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. He has also served as an adjunct professor of law at Berkeley's Boalt Hall School of Law from 2002 to 2007. Please help me welcome Dr. Hatem Bandian.
Good morning and thanks for attending the press conference. American Muslims for Palestine is a national grassroots organization dedicated to education and empowerment of the American Muslim community on the critical issue of Palestine. The release of our ads from unibuses in San Francisco and the monthly report of the subway system in New York emerges from a number of critical concerns. One, the failure of U.S. policy and the lack of any meaningful pressure from Israel. Second, the continued expansion of settlements and confiscation of land in the West Bank. Third, the ongoing demonization and racism directed at Palestinians by Islamophobic ads placed across the country. Fourth, the growing number of organizations and groups in civil society in the region and in the U.S. that are committed to bring about change through the avenue of public engagement. AMP is heartened to work with allies and organizations that are committed to universal human rights, equality, and self-determination, as well as recognizing that justice is indivisible and injustice in Palestine is not and should not be disconnected from our consideration in this country. The message on the ad is directed at our funding of the continued violation and occupation of the Palestinians, which has been made possible over the years with $3 billion that are given to Israel annually. We are directly responsible under international law because we are funding and assisting an illegal occupation. The Obama administration has so far failed to bring about any changes on the ground. On the contrary, the U.S. has become politically feeble and impotent when it comes to anything related to Israel. So much so that every time a U.S. official visits the country, he or she is met with a new settlement approved and funded by the government. This process has been anything but a continued land grab and systematic fragmentation of Palestinian society and territories, thus enabling occupation by means of the peace process.
Viva, viva Palestina! Viva, viva
The building of the
Palestina!
apartheid wall,
Viva, viva Palestina!
the building of the apartheid wall is contravention of the 4th Geneva Convention as the ruling by the International Court of Justice points to the failure of the U.S. as the mediator of the peace process. We have become an enabling state of the
The United
occupation
States of
and
America shall
dehumanization of
not
Palestinians.
divest from Israel, irregardless of what students, professors in Palestine at the University of California, Berkeley say. Fuck Hall and fuck Sid Patel, because I am the graduate baccalaureate in the theater and performance studies major at the University of California, Berkeley, in the Department of Theater Performance Studies. Stand on stage now.
Our standing in the Arab Muslim region is directly impacted by this people policy, and we are increasingly losing support and seen as a tail wagging the dog when it comes to Israel. The continued expansion of settlements is a glaring outcome of U.S. failure, and our political leadership acting as a cheerleading squad for Israel's intransigence. All settlements are illegal, and the U.S. should not soft-pedal its position by ignoring this violation. As the continued demonization and racism directed against Palestinians with reference to savages and other types of attacks, which must be challenged, and the public space and civil society institutions are collectively responding by supporting AMP ads. I am aware that some negative comments have been directed at our ads by those who support Israel, be it right or wrong. They take issue with the term apartheid and that Israel is not an apartheid state. Interesting fact is that the same groups and individuals actually some time back were defenders of South Africa's apartheid system and likewise protected Israel from criticism when it was violating the sanctions on selling weapons and arms to South Africa. It is not up to Israel or its defenders to define what is or what is not an apartheid. Rather, the international legal framework should be the instrument to determine what is apartheid and what is not. Increasingly, laws and regulations are set in Israel that created an apartheid system, where one set of laws applies to Jewish citizens, while another set applies to the Palestinians inside Israel, and a total segregation is applied in the West Bank. Indeed, Israel is a democracy in the same way that the U.S. at its founding was a democracy. That does not include Native Americans, African Americans, and for sure not women were included in the U.S. democratic system at its inception. The mere permission to vote does not address the structural inequalities directed at Palestinians inside Israel through a two-tier citizenship process, legal discrimination, land expropriation, inferior education system, labor discrimination, and forceful transfer. Inside the occupied territories, Palestinians are denied legal protection, constant and systematic land confiscation, restriction on movement with some 450 checkpoints, as well as an apartheid law. The ads are intended to bring attention to our role, U.S. funding, as well as the legal and moral responsibility for being an enabler for human rights violations. As Palestinian Americans, we are at a constant agony that our tax funds are being used to support the dehumanization and human rights violations of brothers and sisters across the ocean. All men and women are created equal and endowed with inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It is time for us to include the Palestinians in this expression. Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any questions? We can field the questions for three questions. Yes, sir.
Well, I think the term has been used in comparison for quite some time. During the heydays of the South African apartheid, there was constant comparison between the situation of the Palestinians in Palestine and South Africa. This has to be mentioned in relation to the strong relationship between the ANC, which was very strong supporters of Palestinians, and the Palestinian supporters of the ANC in its struggle against South African apartheid. But more recently, President Jimmy Carter used of the term apartheid in his book, Peace Not Apartheid, brought the term into far more frequency and currency across public discourse, and followed also by Desmond Tutu upon his return from his visit, asserting and articulating that the similarity between what the South Africans have suffered as apartheid and what the Palestinians are going through is similar. So now I think even within Israeli political domestic discourse, the term apartheid is not controversial. And that's what's ironic, that in Israel, the debate about apartheid structure is wide open, while in here, the JCRC and ADL want to suppress it once again, just like they were suppressing any discussions about Israel in relation to South Africa apartheid during the 80s.
Any public space should be a space for debate and discussions where there
pay $3 billion to support a state that's violating human rights, segregation, expulsion, so I don't see the question implies that public discourse should lead to critical issues.
We got to know that just right here. The way you vote. I love you all.
There's been a lot of back and forth.
Start to kiss him.
A lot of that. I got but the public at large, all the public is part of the discussion, just like we see on the Muni ads for to sway the public to go and see a movie. I don't see any problem with the public being swayed to consider an issue, especially if their tax money $3 billion are going to fund a country that is almost constantly violating human rights. So the public in general is to be swayed to the campaign that people outside here.
Gotta protect this microphone and save and protect the marriage of the country. Thank you. Jesus out back. I love you all. We save our land from all our crises that the children and give away the
Jewish community.
and the children.
In the end, that we don't want to have these ads either, but we want to stand in line for them. In other words, we want to pressure Israel and human rights violations, and that would be claimed not only for Palestinians, but for Israelis as well. And the other charge that's often made, I think the conflation of these kinds of ads with anti-Semitism is so dangerous, because the charge is that this is targeting Jews. Jews are extremely diverse. Many of us are very supportive of these ads. And number two, Israel is a state like any other. It should not be treated exceptionally. We should be able to be critical of Israeli state policy, just as we are critical of the United States policy. To do so does not make anyone a bigot. Yes.
I was wondering if you tell me why you think now is particularly a rich time to bring this conversation to your home. If there's anything that's happened over the last year that particularly to the forefront, including the United States.
It's always a good time to bring an issue whenever there's injustice taking place. But the motivating factor behind our ad campaign was the recent visit by President Obama to occupied territories to Israel. And before that was the visit of Vice President Biden, where the day he visited, there was an announcement of another settlement as a way to almost slap the U.S. Political establishment in the face to say that it is us who determine when the settlement will go up. And what we saw is that the president almost was amused in presenting any criticism in Israel at the time when the settlement was made. Interesting enough, the constant drumming about the peace process. And from 1990 until 2012, the number of settlers in the West Bank has increased almost 65 people. So now we have almost 520,000 settlers that are in the West Bank. More land has been confiscated for the settlement by the Palestinian peace process than the 27 years before the occupation. And as such, it brings to attention that now we see the utter failure of U.S. political leadership. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu visited, you would think that he came to the Congress with the celebration that was offered him and the welcoming. You would think that he already had time to stress in my visit
to the Holy Land. It reminded me so much of what happened to us black people in South Africa. That is a vague statement, and that is taken out of context. Desmond Tutu is a humanitarian. He would never say that the Holy Land is a disgrace, and it reminded him of black people in South Africa. Because not only black people are in apartheid movement in South Africa. You remember the African National Congress. There are colored people as well. There are black people as well. There are Afrikaners. There are Dutchmen. There are Englishmen. There are all kinds of people in South Africa. Not just black. I'm not taking out of context. What Desmond Tutu has to say about this is taken out of context. people.
that is diverse and that we can get along.
Thank you,
That's
everyone.
the
No. Are you gonna run away from me?
That the Holy Land of Jerusalem, Jerusalem, is an atrocity of
Now, can you
apartheid.
say that?
I'm the Associated Press of the United States of California.
No, what I'm saying is, why don't you just embrace it?
Actually, I was the birth.
Why don't you just make it a point that no one else? That's what happened with
I have all my
That's what happened. People that are out of India, they just smell good. I mean, it's not.
Oh, I don't know. There's so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're running away from that question. Okay?
Longer than Yitzhak Rabin! Longer than Sadat! Longer than Arafat! Do not forget Yitzhak Rabin! For the love of Jerusalem! For the love of Tel Aviv! For the love of Israel! Do not forget Yitzhak Rabin!
Alright, so welcome to San Francisco. At least you know she's not with the ADO.
I know.
I'm glad she's not on our side. Yeah, I left to the idiot as a crazy.
Huh?
I'm glad she's not on our side.
Oh, I know. It's very difficult to know which side she's on.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she's all over the place.
That's true. She just started
She started with something, then she started with Nehal. I don't know why she brings Nehal into the picture. He was in the English department at Berkeley, student at JP, and then graduated. Now he teaches at the University of Texas, Austin.
We should let him know that he got. I'll Facebook him. Why you get? Yeah, I know who he is.